we're gonna start. Such technology. Okay. Okay, we're going to wait a second. Put myself on. Then we'll put you, Rabbi. Okay. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As we have another wonderful evening with Rabbi Leibel Wolf. So Machai, this year we had you twice in 2 months. It's like truly a great honor to have you in this situation. Rabbi Wolf, I've introduced you so many times, but you're a voice of calmness. You're a voice of deep understanding. You're a voice in the time that where we always are struggling. You're a voice of sense. And to bring us all to a place that as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah, and every one of us is feeling a little bit down, maybe feeling a little victimized, victimized by God, maybe, whatever. And so it's always great to hear your voice and to hear the way you express yourself and your teachings in these times. I just want to connect it to the Pasha. We always, as more people come out, we always, this week's Pasha, Kisavi Alaretz, where the Torah tells us the mitzvah of Bikurim, which there's a beautiful Rashi. The Rashi said the mitzvah of Bikurim was only obligated until the entire land was conquered and it was divided, which took 14 years, 7 years to conquer and 7 years to divide. And the question's asked, but in the first year, there was a certain amount of Jews that had already conquered the land, and they were living already in their land in peace and tranquility. Why would they have to wait 14 years to do this mitzvah? And Rashi says, because until all Jews are in their land in peace and in tranquility, no Jew can be, happy and satisfied even with his own portion. So we're all going through struggles these days, and some more and some less. And therefore, I think that your voice today and your teachings today will be a great calming and tranquility to all of us as we prepare for Yom Tov. I want to thank again Dr. Moshe and Sharon Perez, who are here tonight. I want to thank them for hosting you and for bringing you here and for pushing you always to come. And it's a great honor to have you, Leibel. It's always a great honor to hear you and to have you. It's whenever you want to do this weekly, Hineni, I'm available. Because it's such a pleasure to listen to you. So with that, without any further ado, all the way from Australia, look at the technology. You're sitting in Australia, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're talking to us in Florida when it's 8 o'clock at night. So that's the Neflayas HaBoda, the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm going to keep everybody on mute, myself included. And after this conversation, Rabbi Leibel, you'll tell me when, and we'll open it up, and you'll wave your hand, and we'll give you a chance to unmute you to ask the question. Without any further ado, all the way from Australia, world down under, Rabbi Leibel Wolf.
Thank you very, very much. It's always a real pleasure to be with you. Going back so many, many years. And of course, it's wonderful to be with Sharon and Moshe, and also to have so many faces that I can now recognize. And Rabbi Kramer, thank you very, very much for facilitating. It's always a pleasure to work with you and everybody else. So here we are. We're here still at a stage where we're living a little bit on edge, but nevertheless, I'm sure that the purpose of living on edge will become very apparent as time goes by. I think that without us actually recognizing, there are a lot of significant teachings that we're gaining, even subliminally, whether it be in terms of our closeness of relationship, whether it's a matter of pulling together, or whether it's really seeing the cracks in society that need healing and making it very apparent and very, very clear. Whatever be the case, I have absolute faith that there's purpose in design, and we're going to see the results of that purpose in the not too distant future. Our topic for today, the notion of victim, the notion of fear, and the notion of freedom which underlies it. When I was at the University of Wisconsin many, many years ago, teaching there and helping Jewish students, it was back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a catch cry amongst the students, and it was, freedom means to do what one wants to do, whenever one wants to do it, wherever one wants to do it, with whomever one wants to do it, for any reason that one wants to do it. Absolute freedom. And on the surface, I suppose, that suggests a level of eternal freedom. The Rebbe points out that this catch cry, in effect, is slavery. It's the opposite of freedom. It's slavery to one's ego. It's slavery to the I want. And there's no level of boundary to I want. What is freedom? Let's look at the artist. An artist is able to express freedom by being able to operate within the limits of a canvas, being able to use brushes of different kinds, paints of different hues and colors, textures within the paints of different order, and to be able to, over a period of lifetime, to express that freedom which comes from self-discipline. It's the irony of it, is it not? That freedom ultimately is a product of limitation, self-discipline, boundaries, or whether it be a musician. A musician is able to express music only in context of that instrument or those instruments and that set of notes, which is able to then carry the soul through the body, through the fingers, through the breath, into an expression of the nuances of music that touches our hearts and touches our minds. In other words, what are we discovering? We're discovering that freedom ultimately is dependent on discipline, limitation, and boundaries. Now, this is an unusual anomaly, and it goes directly against the kind of catch cry of the 60s and 70s. In other words, we're not being very instructive or looking deeper inside at the word freedom. Politically, we speak about freedom as a generalization, but let's analyze what it really is. So let us go back to basics. Let us ask ourselves, what indeed does it mean to be an artist of the soul? Because it's the soul's travel through the body that ultimately is expression of freedom. In the past, in previous occasions, we have discussed the whole notion of the neshama being a spiritual energy that animates the physiological machinery of the body. And unless you have the two together, you don't have life. We pointed out in our last session that a person, 5 seconds after he or she, God forbid, dies, stops hearing and stops seeing, even though the eye and the ear is absolutely impeccable in its integral state. Something's missing. In other words, the spiritual energy that courses through the body and animates it somehow is no longer there. Freedom is to allow that neshama, let's use that word for the spiritual energy, the neshama to flow through the body in an ideal state. And there is no one ideal state. There are different purposes to which we apply our body. Sometimes it's mind and thought and insight, and now in the month of Elul, introspection to the nth degree. And how do we carry that out? By directing the flow of consciousness of the neshama through the brain, resulting in mindful introspection. At other times, we need to be able to be dexterous with our hands, making challah, shaping the challah, and in so doing, directing the flow of consciousness, not just through the brain and the mind, but extended right through our body to the extremities of our body, the fingers, which is also true of a pianist or an artist. And then there may be other times where we need to apply the discipline, the self-containment, the boundary in context of our emotions. Someone provokes us. Someone says something nasty to us. We watch a particular vision on media and it upsets us. We need to be able to then take our inner self, direct the flow of consciousness in such a way that the emotions have boundaries. I'm not going to be provoked by going out into the street and shooting someone. I might want to on occasion, but I'm not going to do that. In other words, freedom means directing the flow of consciousness of the neshama through the body. That's going to be our bottom line of expression of freedom. Now, let's apply it to the word victim. There are two words I want to introduce, both a variable of the word victim: victimization and victimhood. What's the difference between victimization and victimhood? Victimization is what others want to do to me. Victimhood is my choice to be a victim. Notice I use the verb choice. Again, victimization is what others want to do to me. The verb is want, they want. Victimhood is me. I choose whether to be a victim or not. Now, there is some very good literature concerning this. And of course, we can look no better than Viktor Frankl, who we mentioned on a number of occasions. And many of you are fully familiar with Viktor Frankl, the survivor of Auschwitz for 4 years, a psychiatrist at the outset of the Holocaust, who was able to maintain a clinical posture throughout all those years in the camps, observing, noting, taking it in. And what was his underlying thesis? As he notes in his wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, the thesis was, they can imprison me externally, but they cannot imprison me internally. I can choose the way I respond. And then another survivor of the camps, some of you may have heard of her, Edith Eger, or Ager. She also was a survivor and then went on to the United States and became a clinical psychologist and a very wonderful healer of many people. And she notes in her work, a book called Choice, very fine book. She notes what advice her mother gave her as they were being taken to the camps. Her mother said to her, remember, they cannot take away from you your mind. How you respond is your choice. Somewhere deep down, that freedom can never be taken away from us unless we deny it to ourselves. When we abnegate choice, when we fail to exercise exercise it. So, victimization. Someone yells and screams at me. Nasty epithets, even anti-Semitic, whatever might be the case. I have a choice in the way I respond. Of course, an undisciplined default response is the self-talk. How dare they speak to me like that? How horrible is that? They're terrible people. And I'm going to shout back at them. I'm going to assert myself. I'm going to show them who I am. And you throw back words. All right, that's not an uncommon response. But what if the response was something else? What if the response were, they're yelling and screaming at me. They're saying these nasty things. Clearly, they have a problem. What can I do to assist them to alleviate their problem? Now, you'll say, that's highly altruistic. That's so idealistic, Leibel. Hey, you can't do that. And the answer is, of course you can. Of course, you don't believe necessarily that you can, in the space of the next 2-3 minutes, heal them. That would be the height of egotism. In other words, right, I've done my job, I've kept my silence, I've strategized, I might be able to say something which might help. But that's only a maybe. The question isn't so much what you do to heal them, because it's very unlikely to an angry person like that, you're going to heal them with some innate wise words that come out of the mouth in the way that perhaps someone on a mountainside after 40 years of introspection would be able to do so. And even then, I'm not sure. But the point is, you are exercising your inner choice in terms of how you respond. That's the point I'm making. If you're able to express, if you're able to define the boundaries of your canvas, the limits of your piano, and in so doing, become an expert within it, you become free. If you don't allow other people to victimize you because you choose your inner freedom rather than victimhood. Now, maybe I'm making some headway with you, but then inevitably someone's going to ask me the question, emotional assault, emotional exploitation. He or she assaults me every day emotionally. And I'm going to say a rather harsh response. You choose that. Now, I know that's very hard because it's really very emotion-laden, such a subject, because many people suffer. But I'm saying to you that the therapeutic approach is to express your freedom. And the freedom is expressed by not allowing yourself to be emotionally assaulted, not by controlling the other one. You don't control anyone else except yourself, but the manner in which you internalize the information and respond in a manner of pure freedom, which may be silence, which may be walking away, even permanently walking away, or it may be a wise word, or it may be an empathic, compassionate response, which is ideal. That is freedom. And that's why Hashem injected into the world that quality of freedom. How? We know that Hashem's primary tool of creation, Hashem had a set of tools, so to speak. The primary tool was chesed. Now, chesed means the expression of kindness, sharing, loving. This underlies the world. As I mentioned last time, every aspect of the world expresses it. Ideally, even the inanimate world, the earth. Earth takes a seed and nurtures it into growth. The feminine earth takes the male seed and nurtures it in its womb, in the earth's womb. and in so doing provides through the flow of chesed growth, contribution to the world, to humankind, to the animal world, to the birds. And that's just an example, but everything is impregnated with the quality of chesed because that is the primary tool, including us. Ask yourself, when back in your lifetime have you felt the most ecstatic moment of fulfillment, happiness of high order, whether it might have been in childhood, adulthood? And I have no doubt that that moment was characterized by a state of giving and sharing with a loved one, whether it be emotionally, whether it be tangibly. But chesed underlies the totality of creation. As the Tehillim say, chesed olam yibana, that the world is continuously being created through the flow of chesed. Therefore, are we surprised if we respond in a compassionate, empathic way that this is the expression of freedom? Hashem placed freedom at our fingertips. We need to be able to express it. And that's the difference between victimization and victimhood. And as I said, there'll be people who are actually angry at what I'm saying, that I'm not sympathetic to the fact that they're being exploited emotionally. But in my counseling practice, the way I conduct the growth of an individual who has chosen to be a victim is to allow that person to undo that choice and to be able to express the freedom. And the emotional exploitation doesn't disappear, it simply dissipates, it dissolves, because we have a different mind, emotion, posture in response to the words, in response to the emotion that's being directed against us. I won't go further with that, but it's really, really important. So the whole idea of freedom means to be able to allow our neshama to flow optimally through our mind and through our heart in a balanced fashion. Moyach shalit al halev. The mind defines the outcomes of our feelings, the balance of mind and emotion. So, having said that, let's talk a little bit more about the idea of how we actually operate in an interrelational setting. Because it's between each other that comes through our quest for either freedom expression or, God forbid, being imprisoned. So let me move in this direction. We said that the primary motivation of life is to connect. We've done that in previous lectures. We've spoken about love, and we said that the underlying factor that seals love is connectedness. And what we want to do constantly is to connect. However, there is a feature that gets in the way. Fear, which leads to anxiety. And that anxiety leads to psychic energy being wasted. And the result is we become tireder physically. And the result is we become weary. And our emotions become ragged. And our mind ceases to operate clearly. So let's talk about this notion of fear, which leads to anxiety. We've spoken in the past about the word stress. Some of you may not have been with me when we discussed it. So let me give you a 60-second review. Stress does not begin here. I'm sorry, I'll start that again. That was dramatic and exactly wrong. Stress doesn't begin there. Stress isn't out there. Stress isn't something that people do to you, that the world does to you, that COVID-19 does to you. That's not stress. Stress is how I here interpret the circumstances. I create stress. I'm the one who actually interprets and causes myself a problem. Not you. You make your noises. The world makes its noises. Presidents make their noises. Presidential contenders make their noises. But at the end of the day, it's how I interpret that creates stress. We create our own stress. And that arises from the way we interpret what it is that we hear or see, etc. And that produces a malfunction of the body. And that malfunction is felt like anxiousness, sometimes downright fear. This is the antithesis of freedom. This is the opposite of love. This is disconnection. I'm disconnecting my animating spiritual flow of neshama from its appropriate consciousness balance in the body. Let me take it more slowly. We said that love means connectedness. And now I'm saying fear is disconnectedness. And you note that in your own life. When you love something, you're drawn towards it. It may be your loved one. It may be a food. It may be knowledge. You're drawn towards it. You're connecting. When you're afraid of something, you step backwards. You move away. So the idea of fear is the opposite of love. On the other hand, there's sometimes wisdom in moving away. For example, if it's fire and you're too close, you'll be burnt. So you move away. Sometimes it may appear to be love, but really it's not love at all. It's something much more superficial, and you should move away. In other words, moving away has its place, as connecting has its place. Sometimes even connecting is unwise. I can love chocolate too much. I can love my child to such an extent that I smother them. So even connecting can sometimes be too overpowering. And likewise, disconnecting is not always wrong. So for example, when you have fear of danger, that is a purposeful disconnection. When you have a sense of awe, of greatness, you're in the presence of someone who's enormous in stature. You have that sense of limitation, smallness, a sense of awe in front of God in the month of Elul. Even though the king is in the field in the month of Elul, which means accessible, and the king is no longer in his regal clothes, locked up in a palace, but during the month of Elul, we have the opportunity, because the king goes out to inspect his fields, and we can approach the carriage and look at the king. And the king isn't awesome. The king is friendly, receiving us with kindness, even expressing an inner smile that radiates through the whole body. So that's the month of Elul. But then we come to Tishrei, and we come to the Aseret Yimei Teshuvah, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and there's a sense of awe. There's a sense of fear. But that fear and awe is not misplaced. But let me go back to the topic. There is fear that is very misplaced, and that when it becomes and it moves into anxiety, anxiousness. That is a misplaced fear. Now, what is the basis of anxiousness? What is the basis of anxiety? Firstly, I'm going to give you the first property of anxiety. The first property of anxiety is, I have decided I am one of God's prophets. I've decided that I can tell the future. And you know what? The future looks glum. And you know what? I'm afraid of the future. And because I'm afraid of the future, my body's going to suffer. I'm going to become anxious. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, at the moment, there's 35 of us watching. How many of you are prophets? Stand up, please. Let me know. We'd all like to recognize you as such. Wave your hand. No one's waving their hand. Rabbi, there's no prophets amongst us. I certainly thought you would be, but there's no prophets amongst us. Therefore, you can't tell the future? You mean you really can't tell the future? You mean you don't know whether tomorrow is going to be good or bad? You don't? And if you don't, why do you become anxious? Why do you suffer anxiety? You just told me you're not a prophet. Anxiousness and anxiety is, I am telling the future and it's not good. And the result is anxiousness and anxiety. So if we're not a prophet or prophetess and we can't tell the future, why be anxious? As I've said previously, there's a 50-50 statistical probability that tomorrow is going to be much better than today or not as good. You don't know. So why jump to the glass that's half empty and not jump to the glass that's half full? It's equally weighted with much better results if you decide on the cup that's half full. Why? Because the cup that's half full produces with you a sense of equanimity. And what does that do for you? That allows the brain to be able to send signals down to the cellular level, resulting in what you and I would call broadly health and wellness. Whereas anxiety gets the brain to send signals to the cells of the body, causing malfunction, and that's what we call sickness, whether it be of the mind or whether it be of the body. Therefore, as I said previously, let's adopt a position axiomatically. I can give you no rationale why you should choose the 50 percentile of positivity, other than the results will be rather good. But anxiety, fear of tomorrow, that COVID is going to take over the world, I'm never going to go back to a normal life. What is this all about? What, you're playing prophet? Look at the history of the world. We've always walked away from the edge. Human ingenuity has always been able to overcome. Hashem always sends exactly the right pieces of information for the right time. There's no such thing as a challenge that Hashem gives us that we don't have the means to overcome. That's the history of the world. And yes, there is suffering in the meantime. There was suffering during the Holocaust, God forbid. But our suffering, when we have running water, you have electricity, you're able to go and buy your goods and services, and you call that suffering? Come on. And that creates anxiousness, and that creates mental breakdown. Let's get a sense of proportion. Yes, we are going through trials and tribulations of some order, but choose positive outcome. The fear of tomorrow is egotistic. I'm a prophet. Don't go there. We're not. Instead, choose freedom. And freedom means a loving repose, a way of embracing our circumstances and being able to recognize that we have strengths, we have capacities. And I am not going to allow COVID to victimize me. I'm not going to choose victimhood. I'm going to express freedom, the way that Viktor Frankl speaks about it, the way that Eva Eger speaks about it, the way that the Torah speaks about it. So that's in sum what I wanted to share with you in terms of this major topic, which we've encapsulated, and I agree with you, quite inadequately in the space of currently 36 minutes. But as you know, I feel that it's very important not just to listen and to hear, but it's very important to internalize. And I know no better method of internalizing than meditation. And as I've explained on previous occasions, to meditate Jewishly is to meditate in two modes. One mode is to be able to ensure that there is inner peace. Equanimity is the word I used earlier on. And in so doing, create a level playing field so that I can calm myself and recognize how foolish my anxiety and anxiousness actually were. And that's very often carried out through a breathing exercise. And I've done it in the past and I'll do it again because it's an easy one. And I've explained in the past why the Hebrew word breath, neshima, is related to the Hebrew word soul, neshama, because breath is the first level of expression of the soul. And we can have a biofeedback loop, change the way you breathe, and you allow a much better flow of the soul through the body. So that'll be the first part of our exercise. Then the second part of our meditational exercise today, a second exercise, will introduce a visualization to be able to overcome the supposed external fear and to translate victimization into freedom rather than victimhood. Okay, just sit in wherever you're seated in a chair symmetrically, feet positioned on the ground next to each other, hands resting on knees and thighs, back fairly straight, head well balanced on your shoulders. The head is a very heavy part of the body. Your shoulders just a little slumped, and gently close your eyes. And just focus on your breath, gently breathing in and gently breathing out, quite normally. And try to breathe in and out through your nose. As you breathe in, feel the air being cooler. And as you breathe out, feel the air that exits a little warmer.
Rabbi, you're on silent. You're muting yourself. You're
Okay.
good now.
So as you breathe in, allow your abdomen to expand, to collect the air. And as you breathe out, contract your abdomen to push the air out. Deep breath in, expanding your abdomen, contracting your abdomen, and breathe out. And just spend the next 20 seconds practicing deep breathing, abdomen, contract, breathing out, introducing rhythm by breathing in for a count of 3, holding for a count of 3, and breathing out for a count of 4. So take a deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. Breathing smoothly, abdominally, gracefully, a perfect circle. I want you to focus on your heart and become aware that as the heart pumps the blood, at the same time, it radiates an aura of love. Sense the heart spreading love throughout your body. Recalling moments of love that you shared with others. Sensing that warmth of love spreading through your body. Strengthen its flow. Bring to mind a loved one, a spouse, a parent, a child, and allow your heart to embrace them with the feelings of warmth, of chesed, of caring. Picture the radiation from your heart embracing your loved one. Feel its innate goodness, rightness, truth of your love. Bring to mind someone who may have hurt you in the past, who may have verbally attacked you. Take yourself back there. Become aware of your feelings back then. Of feeling pervaded, infiltrated, and now feel that warmth of your heart and love radiating outwards, and try to reach that person even as the verbal attack takes place. Feel your warmth, your compassion blunting that attack by recognizing their pain, their hurt that provokes them to say what they said. Exercise further the loving freedom from your heart, transforming the seemingly hurtful words into understanding, recognizing their momentary shortcoming. Be strong in your loving integrity. Don't succumb to being a victim. Transform fear into understanding. And understanding into compassion. Focus again on your heart. Feel the warmth of love as it flows freely. That is who you are. Always remember that. And commit yourself to applying it in all aspects of life, in the real world. Focus again on your breath, gently breathing in and breathing out through your nose, feeling cooler air entering and warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes, wherever you might be. Move your fingers now, move your toes. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes coming all the way back into the room and into our session. Well, we took a little journey together. And as I've said also in the past, sitting down at the piano and playing a piece of music for the first time doesn't cut it. It's only after you practice many, many times that freedom of mind flowing through the body to your fingers allows your soul to play the music in the way that only your soul can. Same with meditation. An exercise doesn't transform, but repeating the scales of the exercise over and over again starts to create change in your natural default response to life. So I wish you success in practicing. I want to wish you success in reaching out and approaching the king in the carriage, in the field where you and I are found, and having an absolutely wonderful, maybe somewhat different, highly personalized Yom Tovim coming up. But let's now have a little chat together. So Rabbi, over to you.
Thank you very much. I believe I'm going to open it up to anybody who wants first to ask a question. Does anybody want to ask a question? Anybody? Ask a question. You want? Okay, so Lauren, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Of course I have to ask something.
Lauren, I wouldn't doubt that one.
So for me, it's more about I wanted to share a really cool story that I think you would like. So yesterday we took my children to an open parking lot to teach them how to bike ride. My daughter just turned 6 and my son turned 8. And he learned back in November, and it's been a while. He hasn't gone. So my daughter was terrified. We took off the training wheels, and I kept saying to her, if you believe you can, you can. If you believe you can't, you can't. And she really was taking off the balance, but she would get nervous and she would stop and then she would fall. So today I said, remember, if you believe you can, you can. She started going and she was going. She went like half, I was chasing after her. And then she fell and she busted her knee and it was bleeding. And she started crying. And she said to me, Mommy, I believed in myself. I believed in myself and I got a bloody knee. And I was thinking how deep that was and how, right? Like how much wisdom was behind that. Because as soon as she got that bloody knee, you think she believed in herself anymore? No. And the rest of the time, it was just me trying to fight to get her to believe in herself again. And I couldn't get her to really open up. So we're going to try again next week. But it made me think how you brought up anxiety and fear. Where does it come from? So a lot of it is irrational, right? It's emotion. It's the way we interpret the world. It's the way we interpret things. But then there's also rational fear. So how the rational fear, like you said, it's healthy to have, like fire. It's important we have rational fear. So I think that it's so important as human beings that we are always aware of fear is not a bad thing. Fear is not a horrible thing to have. You have to have it. It'll keep you alive. Fear will keep you from going to that bear. But the irrational fear is what gives us that anxiety. And then I want to share one more thing. My daughter said to me yesterday, we got into the car because we were overheated and we were taking a break. And she said to me, Mommy, what is Hashem made of? And I said, I don't know. I think energy. And she goes, no, I think love. And I just thought that was so beautiful to share with you and with the rabbi, both of you, that was such an innocent, beautiful way. Yeah.
All right. 99% of all fear is not irrational. It's highly rational. It's the thoughts that lead you to a stage of fear. It's the interpretation that leads to a state of fear. You might recall on some previous occasion, I'm sure I shared with you the following. You remember that somewhere earlier in your children's life, you might have decided it's time for vaccinations. I'm not going to go into the debate whether you should or shouldn't. I have a strong feeling that you should. That's mine. Anyway, consider the case of a parent that says, yes, I'm going to arrange vaccinations for my children. The triple antigen, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit my children down and I'm going to give them a tutorial. And I'm going to tell them, there's nothing to be afraid of. You can believe in yourself. You know, it's true that the doctor's going to produce a needle and he's going to take that needle and he's going to prick it into your skin. Don't be scared, because through that needle, very good things are going to flow into your body that are going to protect you. And so you go on and you explain to your child all the wonderful aspects of protection and not to be afraid. And then you take the child to the doctor and the doctor produces the needle. And as soon as the doctor produces the needle, geschrei, the loudest yelling and screaming from your child that you ever heard. And you ask yourself, what happened to that very wise tutorial I gave my child? What a machaitika child that was then. And look at my child now. Whereas, if you would have never said anything to your children, never given that tutorial, taken the child to the doctor, and at the moment that the doctor produced the needle, you may have averted the child's face, eyes. There still would have been a little yelp or two, but nothing as dramatic as the previous example. Meaning, when you prepare a person for pain, they feel the pain much more acutely. By telling your child, believe in yourself, don't worry, it will be good, you're setting up your child for a fall, literally. And that's what happened. If I were you and I was teaching my children to ride a bike, which I remember 2 generations ago, and now it's with my grandchildren, one day, please God, with my great-grandchildren, I don't tell them what to expect. I know that innately they have capacities. And yes, innately they have a sense that they will fall. But I know that innately they have seen and witnessed many children riding a bike, so they know it's doable. And that's what makes them have the capacity to repeat and repeat even after they fall, without asking the question, Mommy or Daddy, why did you tell me when it didn't happen like that? Don't set them up for a fall. Same with each other. If you start telling people the dangers and the concerns, and you know what, it's spreading and it's going to cause harm and the economy is going to shut down and everything's going to be bad, then you're going to feel the pain much more acutely. People are reasonable. They have their own eyes. Don't exaggerate things to them. Allow them to draw from their inner resources, which we all have. And the best way, to observe you doing that. It's best to teach by example, much more so than through words.
If I may ask you a question, you touched on it a little bit, the difference between Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. If you can just, as we are holding ready Yud Elul,
Okay.
If you can just give us a little bit more, the Rebbe explains Melech Vasada, and going back to the palace, if you can explain it to us a little bit more deeply, what is the exact journey that we are taking?
I'm sure, Rabbi, you could do it much better than I, but nevertheless, since you asked me, let me share the little bit that I perhaps have some understanding of, and even then not quite adequate. The whole notion of the king being in the field means accessibility. And when the king is coming into the field, we can exercise a choice. Are we going to approach the king or not? Are we going to get a glimpse of the king, which we never get a chance because they go to the palace and try to get past the front guards and then to be able to find the minister who's going to arrange an audience, etc. And who am I anyway to be able to be successful? So here is a wonderful opportunity. But then Hashem is kinder than that. It's not just saying it's up to you. Hashem also allows us during the months of Elul to say a certain formula. It's called the Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy. This is a formula that God gave Moses, who passed it on to the Jewish people, that when we enunciate this, the result is we're able to draw from within us something essential about our connection to the King, to God. And what that does, it provides us with an opportunity of reawakening. The month of Elul is our reawakening. The blowing of the shofar every day, as the Rambam says, is to awaken us from a slumber. We have it within us. Every one of us has the capacity to approach the King. And Hashem even allows the opportunity for us to awaken what's innate within us in the month of Elul by the King being in the field as opposed to in the palace. Now, we approach Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the King is back in the palace. But if we played our cards right, if we were able to rise spiritually to our potential in the month of Elul, if we prepared ourselves in the correct manner, and we felt our closeness to the King, then under those circumstances, we get a free pass into the palace. We're able to bypass all the guards and all the ministers and have an audience with the King on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And therefore, what we do during the month of Elul is critical in terms of what the experience is ultimately of God forgiving when we were silly and did things which were off the track, and we restore the unity and the oneness. So take the opportunity in this month of Elul and what remains of Elul, and specifically the last 12 days of Elul, from Chai Elul onwards, to be able to introspect profoundly and deeply, know that there's an opportunity, that the month of Elul has a spiritual quality about it, quite different than any other month in the year, and it's within us, our capacity, and all you need to do is exercise it and then get a free pass, go, and enjoy freedom.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have a question? Anybody wants to ask something? Barbara and Joe, okay, Joe first, then we'll go to Sharon. Okay.
Yeah. Rabbi, regarding COVID, is it being cautious and taking precautions and continuing to stay away from large crowds and going to stores? Is that something that could be considered an irrational fear, or is it just really being cautious with your health?
It's being balanced and it's being wise. Just because there's fire doesn't mean that you have to approach it so close so that the clothes, God forbid, set on fire and cause you harm. You have to take precautions. You have to step away from the fire. And the way we step away from the fire of COVID is by taking natural precautions. Masks, and of course, natural precautions are what the experts tell us. Now, I admit that there's some controversy between experts saying one thing and another, but there is a consensus. And the wearing of masks, being somewhat isolated from each other, at least by a certain distance, so the droplets in the air are not picked up. Basic sensibilities is simply being a balanced individual. It's not being afraid, it's just being wise. And in the current status quo, to be wise and balanced is important. You don't have to be afraid of it. Just take the ordinary precautions that you do under any circumstances, even when there's no COVID. You don't run across the road because you feel free.
Exactly.
You take precautions. And we just have, in a different set of circumstances today, different sets of precautions. Any others?
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello, Sharon. How are you?
Good. I just want to thank you for speaking to our community, because there's just moments sometimes where like you could feel anxious, not even like a reason. So that's great just to add to our toolbox and say, hey, do I want to be a victim here, or choose to just breathe rehashing what you said. So just breathe through the moment. Because sometimes, earlier I felt anxious and I said, why am I feeling this way? Like I wasn't thinking anything negative. It was just like maybe around 5:30, 6 o'clock. So to breathe and just, I guess, to ask the question, am I a victim? Do I want to be a victim? Who's in charge?
Very good. Yes. Now, sometimes you're right. We just feel anxiousness and we don't even know why. And that's because we create through repetition a habit, a default. And that default becomes part of our personality. And what we sometimes need to do is undo that default, undo that habit, because it simply goes there when I have nothing better to do with my mind or my heart. And the best way to undo it is to be conscious, to be mindful at all times. Observe your thoughts, observe your feelings, and if need be, work to change them. And as we've said on previous occasions, and I won't go into that, the whole notion of changing your brain, which we know through the field of neuroplasticity, as it's loosely called, is something that each one of us can actually achieve. So yes, sometimes we feel anxious without knowing why, but then in the next moment, we allow our mind to take over. We start to recognize our thought patterns. We change our thoughts if we choose to. We freely do so. And in so doing, we will alter and change our emotional output. So thank you, everybody, for another wonderful opportunity of spending your evening and my tomorrow morning with you. Since I'm ahead of you, I know the future a little bit better than you. Either way, I think that the whole notion of choosing to be free is so important. Don't ever see yourself as a victim. You have the freedom at all times to respond the way you choose. But to do that, you have to be conscious and mindful. And if you follow the 613 pathways of freedom and connection, which we call mitzvot, you can't go wrong, especially in the month of Elul. Thank you very much, and wishing you all a Shana Tova Umtuka, a very sweet year.
Thank you very much again, Rabbi Leib. I want to wish you in the name of our community that you have spoken to so many times. Aksiv v'chsima tova, Shana Tova Masuka. Have a happy and healthy and beautiful year. And the Mitzvah, we should be able to host you here physically, Mitzvah, the coming up year in 5780, well, 5781, the Mitzvah. We'll be able to, Pei Aleph, we'll be able to have you, Mitzvah, physically here with us, or together in Yerushalayim with the coming of Mashiach. We'll all be in Eretz Yisrael, and we'll all be together with Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'Meheira b'Yameinu Mamish. I just want to tell everybody again, to remind everybody, Amen. I want to just remind everybody that this coming Tuesday is my father-in-law's yard site, which we do every year, is to check mezuzahs, your mezuzahs and your tefillin. So please, this coming Tuesday, if you have any mezuzahs of your house or your store or your offices or whatever, you can take it off. You bring it here on Tuesday morning, and a sofa will be here at the Chabad house and check your tefillin and your mezuzahs. I wish you all a good evening. I wish Rabbi Wolf a good day. And have a good night. Thank you again, Dr. Moshe and Sharon Perez. I greatly appreciate it. We all appreciate this wonderful thing that you do for our community continuously, and your continuous support of this community and everything that it does. The Eibusha should give you a blessed, happy, and healthy year. God bless you all. Have a good night, and we'll see you in Mircham soon, very soon. Hopefully, in Shul all together. Speedily in our days. Have a wonderful evening. Shalom.